Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another chapter of Experiencer Interviews. I'm Mr. Gray, and we've got a very special show for you guys today. Recently, we just celebrated our first-year anniversary, so many thanks to all my subscribers. And today we have on for a second time Suzy Hansen. Suzy, along with Sherry Wilde and Judy Carroll, took part in my very first interview of XI. And now today, thanks to heavenly synchronicities and timing, Suzy's back on XI as my first interviewee of the year to celebrate my first year anniversary. So for those who haven't had the pleasure of meeting Suzy Hansen's worldview was shaken in 1975 at the age of 20 when her car was engulfed and lifted off the road by a massive white ball of light, resulting in 90 minutes missing time. The incident catapulted Suzy headlong into researching New Zealand's nationwide UFO sightings and her own ongoing contact experiences recalled from early childhood. Suzy Hansen is a UFO sighting investigator, author, and contact experiencer from New Zealand. By profession, she was a primary and college teacher and grief counselor. Suzy is the author of the Dual Soul Collection, The Alien Agenda for Human Advancement, with contributions by Dr. Rudy Schild, Emeritus Professor of Astrophysics, Harvard Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics. The Dual Soul Collection documents Suzy's lifetime of experiences with extraterrestrials and non-human intelligences. The Dual Soul Collection addresses aspects of spirituality, consciousness, metaphysics, and alien culture, alongside scientific concepts of physics and advanced organic conscious technology, all within the framework of alien contact, highlighting our interconnection with a wider universal family. So thank you so much for coming on, Susan.
You're welcome, Yannick. It's lovely to see you again.
Yes, it's been too long. Now, yeah, for those who haven't had the pleasure of reading Susan's book, it's really amazing. I read it in 2017. It's a really, really good book, and I highly recommend it. And once you start reading, it's really hard to stop. My girlfriend also read it, and she really enjoyed it. So, Susan, I know you wanted to talk about, for starters, I wanted to say to people that I wanted Susan on board last year in October of 2020 when all the information regarding COVID and the loss of our liberties was being addressed, and I was panicky and depressed, and I wanted Susan to come on board to talk about her experiences regarding some of the, let's say, prophecies that the Greys might have told her over the years, but I never got around to it. And so this was in, let's say, October of last year. And in January, I get a private message from Susan saying the exact same thing, that she wanted to come on and talk about some of the information that the Greys told her over time regarding future events. So my jaw dropped, and I was totally amazed how, we've got a connection going on. So Susan, I'm really glad you want to come on board today and talk about those, because I think it's, with all the bad stuff that's going on the planet, some of us really need to hear what you have to say.
Thank you. Yes, I think it's, as each day goes by, Yannick, it becomes more important that experiencers understand what is happening and start putting all the information that we have together, piecing pieces together. But as I said to you just prior to us going on air, I also think it's a time where there's areas where we need to step up, and there's areas where we need to step back. Because the time is coming, I think, where it will be quite dangerous, if I can use that word, or sometimes harmful for us to be out there, saying our bit. And there's a time when we will need to step back just to protect ourselves, because we can only do so much to get other people on board with what's happening in the world. Every soul has its own decisions to make, and we can provide information. It's that old saying, we can lead a horse to water, but we can't make it drink. And I think that time is approaching us fairly soon.
Now, was this information given to you over time, or did this happen during like one or two events?
Well, I was told quite a few little snippets that came up in conversations on craft throughout the years. But I think around about when I was 25 in the 80s is when information really started coming to the fore. And that on that occasion, a whole lot of humans, perhaps 250 of us, were taken to an undersea base. And we there attended a lecture with an ET and a human, and this human is one that I have seen on a number of occasions before, either in facilities or bases or on craft. So that is the first thing that should indicate to us that there is a long-standing relationship, not only between experiencers, contactees, and abductees with the ETs, but with some other echelon of humans on this planet. A lot of people will say, oh, it's American government or this or that, but it may well be that it's people right across the board throughout the world who are part of this. It may not just be America. But we were taken to this undersea base, and we were told or lectured to about things that might happen in the future to do with disclosure. And for a start, they said it would be an extremely long process, which they had already started. So this was back in the 80s, and we're now 2021, and no massive disclosure has happened yet. We're getting drip-fed stuff at the moment that's being leaked out of the Pentagon or leaked from the Navy or whatever, but we still haven't got that massive disclosure that people are hoping for, and I really don't think that it's going to happen in the way that people would like it to or expect it to. Because we're talking about governments and military organizations that have security issues for the people of their country, and they are limited in what they can express to us or indicate to us. I think that it's going to take a lot of other things that happen in between now and a time when we are told some rather juicy information. I think that there's going to be a lot of things happen in the interim. And that may be world events like seismic and volcanic activity that increases. It may be a lack of good food distribution throughout the world, so that a lot of people are without sustainable food. And it could also be massive weather changes. But it could also be that, as the ETs have said to experiencers many times, they will increase the sightings and increase the sightings and increase them until such time as they become undeniable. So really the big disclosure that we're waiting for may actually be an event, or it may be an accumulation of events that are driven by people power, that are driven by our desire to understand what's happening on the planet. Yes, I think we also look towards the states too much and too often as the leadership of this whole disclosure thing. When you talk to other sighting researchers worldwide, as I do, as wearing my hat as a sighting investigator, you find that there are amazing things happening and have happened over the years in terms of sightings and contact in a lot of other countries. So the States really, in many ways, has set itself up as the leaders in this area. But when you really travel around and speak in other countries, as I have, and communicate with other researchers, you actually find that the States has a very different perspective on many things to what the rest of the world has. And I include in that the whole abduction scenario, the greys, and all of those antagonisms really that are quite prominent in the States, history of the States study of these subjects.
When you look at all the videos coming out, especially on Fox, now recently they've been showing what looks like a triangle UFO flashing. I think this happened maybe like less than a week ago on the Tucker show, I believe. It could possibly be a TR-3B, because I don't see why the American military would show an actual craft when they've got their own. So it's like a fake disclosure.
Yes, well, a group of researchers I belong to internationally has looked into this and think that it's possibly something called bokeh, which I hadn't heard of before, but it's actually a photographic anomaly. So if this was photographed through, for example, a cell phone and through a night vision scope, you can get an anomaly where the aperture in the camera turns up looking just like that. And if it was aimed at, for example, an ordinary aircraft, and you've got that regular flashing going on, it may well actually be an aircraft. But the the camera produces this this anomaly. So that is one explanation that has been put forward and has been taken seriously by a lot of sighting investigators worldwide. Well, as you said, I mean, why would they be photographing their own, for example? We don't know what it is. So I was interviewed on New Zealand radio about this just the other night. And I think they were rather hoping that I would enthusiastically say it's a UFO, it's from outer space. But, you know, we need to look at the details, and we don't have the details yet until this report comes out in June 25th, July 25th, June, one of the two. And even then they may not give us the details. So our expectations, we need to button back on our expectations of what other people are going to provide us with.
Yes.
And we have to start looking at what information we collectively have. And start relying on our own discernment and our own critical thinking, because it's very easy to be impressed by what is being put out by someone who says they were once in the Pentagon or they were once doing this or that in an important position. And we don't know what agendas might be at play behind the scenes. And so the ETs for decades now have been warning groups of humans that I've been a part of that we are to be very careful of this. We are to remain independent. We are to use our discernment and our critical thinking and examine everything very carefully, because there may be things that appear great that are not so great after all. And at the moment, I'm seeing, you know, a number of agendas at play and possible reasons for certain things being done. And I think that's where the massive confusion is rising up on this planet, because we no longer know what to believe, and many of us have forgotten to think for ourselves.
Yeah, it's very scary with what's going on. There's a huge confinement, you know, coming into play, and it's you know, it's been happening. I think it's been planned for years and years, but they've done it so well that people have been hoodwinked to believe that what's going on is actually true. Can you get into some of the? Go ahead.
No, go on.
Can you get into some of the I hate saying prophecies, but some of the things that the Greys might have told you over the years and that actually happened?
Yes, well, I don't call them prophecies because that sort of has connotations, but really, what you just said, you said, you know, these things are planned. Well, I don't even know if planned is the right word, but I know what you mean, because way back decades, the ETs were talking to groups of humans about the future. And when I wrote my book, it was before all of these things that they had talked about many of them had not happened by that stage. So I felt a huge sense of urgency at one stage. I'd been procrastinating on the book a little bit, you know, doing other things and working on the book at night, or doing a couple of hours work in the early hours of the morning if I couldn't sleep. And I wasn't really progressing through it. And at some stage, it was like I got the message, get the book finished. There's a reason. So helter-skelter, day and night, you know, writing and getting it done. And looking back now, I can see why that was, because not long after the book came out, in fact, only months after it came out, I saw the first things happening on the planet that they had talked about that are in some of the chapters in my book. So, for example, and I've talked about this before, in 2015, I spoke in Europe and Scandinavia and the UK after my book came out. And at that point, I saw coming up through Italy from Africa, coming across the Mediterranean, saw all of the immigrants pouring up through Europe, and seeing that situation of people with nowhere to go spiritually or intellectually or job-wise or home-wise, or any of those things, nowhere to belong, searching for somewhere to belong. That was the first sign that they had talked about. They talked about it is all going to really start when you see people who have nowhere to go, no home, no spiritual base, nothing. and they will be moving in massive numbers, and it will continue. So within months of putting the book out there, I saw the first sign that they talked about in a very profound way. As my husband and I were coming down through Italy, we were seeing them coming up. And since then, of course, there's been massive exoduses in South America, for example, and other parts of the world, where huge columns of people are leaving their country and trying to seek a better life elsewhere. And so that really shook me up. That really made me start examining what they had said and what I'd written in the book, which was, okay, here's what they told me, here it is. But then you actually see it starting to happen. And it's been one thing after another since then. For example, they talked about the fact that a lot of the humanitarian groups, such as Red Cross, etc., would not be able to function sooner or later because there would be so much need for those groups to be functioning, and there would be political reasons why they can't move into an area. There'd be borders set up. There'd be, now we've got COVID, there'd be all sorts of reasons why they couldn't get into areas to assist people. And they said, you will have to stop relying on these groups. And this is where part of our program that we will be working on over the years, over the decades, will be how to facilitate this kind of survival help without relying on those groups. So, it's been a constant flow of things since then. They talked about the earth changes, how this would become very dramatic, and people would have to start analysing where they live and how they're functioning and how they're leading their life to cope for the severe weather changes and the seismic volcanic activity. So soon after that, soon after I'd been on a craft being told about these programs that they're implementing to help people to survive. So I'll just briefly describe that. They're taking hundreds of people on board, and they're using people like myself and others who've been lifelong experiencers to talk to people and teach them and put thought seeds, if I can put it that way, in their head. So transferring information to them that will open up at a time, a trigger, a tragedy or something like that that happens in their life or their country. And they will just know how to swing into action, how to help people, how to direct people, etc. Now, it's very interesting that I had all this recollection and wrote about it, because recently I was talking to one of Dr. John Mack's proteges, or a person who was younger at the time that he worked with, an experiencer, and she told me about another of his students who studied with him, who has said for decades that their job will be to assist people to get on to craft, that people will be lifted out of certain areas. Now, I've never heard people talk about, I've never heard ETs talk about that to me, but I know now a number of people who've been told that same thing, and that's what their expectation is, that as a part of these programs that they've been running and training us, that's one of the jobs that some experiencers will do, and that's what this person believes lies in their future. So, well, I've rattled on a bit there, but
that's all right. Haven't you, like, correct me if I'm wrong, in your book, I think there was a story where you said you were in an auditorium and there were many souls there, and you were talking to them about certain events that will happen in their lifetimes, and some of them might not make it. And could you, because it's somewhat connected to what's happening right now.
That was in 2011. In 2011, I had two onboard craft memories that were exactly 1 month apart. And the first one happened in March, I think, and that's the incident you're talking about. We were a small group of humans who, lifelong experiencers, were taken into a room, and we were told, you are going to be lecturing tonight. And we'd had a previous board craft experience some months earlier, where we'd been given a structure like a template for giving a speech, if I can put it that way. And it was explained to us that a time was coming up soon where we would need to be lecturing on a craft. And this template that had been put into our minds or our consciousness, we would use that, we would build on it and utilize it. So it was like being given an outline which we could add to from our own experience if we wanted to make it our own. So on this occasion, we're taken on the craft. We're told, okay, tonight is the night you're going to be lecturing, and there we are sitting there in our nightwear. And I went into a lecture room that had a large number of people in tiered seating, and that's the second incident. The first one was what you're talking about, the souls. So there were just balls of light. And I knew that they were people who within the next few years would lose their life in tragic earth change type situations. It was a very draining, very somber, very sad situation. And so we were offering these souls the opportunity when they pass over to transit very quickly. So instead of going into the, field of consciousness, as Dr. Schild calls it, and sleeping there for decades or hundreds of years before they choose another life, they were asked if they would come back on board the grey craft and they would allow themselves, as in their soul state, to be trained and taught and informed and to incarnate quite quickly, so that as Earth goes through its changes, we will have youth coming forward to take us into that new era eventually. And so this gives us hope, because this tells us that the ETs don't think our world is going to end. We're not going to ruin it and blow ourselves up, but we're going to go through some very tough times before we start to come out the other end. So these souls, I felt the sorrow from them. I felt at a soul level their deep understanding of the situation as a soul, as opposed to the human in the life that they were leading. The soul state had a great deeper understanding of what they'd come here for, what was going to happen, and the choice that they could make once they passed over. And it's interesting to note that not long after that, we had the Japanese tsunami. Lots of people lost their lives. We had a number of other incidents in the world where there was huge loss of life. And I can only assume that some of those souls were people involved in that. The second half of it was talking to humans about how they, in their communities, could assist people when earth changes occur. So those people were in an altered state, so they didn't really understand where they were. They'd been transported there. They could understand the information being given to them and the discussion taking place, but they were just not really aware of the surroundings or whatever. And that's why the ETs chose to put a human in front of them, because if they slipped out of the altered state, they wouldn't be shocked and seeing an ET, they would be seeing a human. So these lectures went on over quite a long period of time, but I had the recall of those two specific events on board craft, and I think that I was allowed that recall, or had that recall, simply because I would be able to talk about it and understand it better. Because some experiences are meant to express these things and others have other jobs to do.
Coming back to the altered states, when the first time I had what I perceive it as an ET face hovering over my bed, I was super calm for some reason. And I didn't know anything about ETs, but for some reason I was very, very calm. And I just looked at it and I thought, okay, it's a ghost, or because I could see through it, but it was clearly the face of a great or a mantid. But the second time, when I had shadow beings in my bedroom, I was really, really drugged up. And I was still able to move, but I was drugged up. So I'm not sure if it's the same type of altered states that your people might have been in. So
yeah, just a lack of awareness of where they are.
Okay.
They're aware that they're sitting with other people and they feel quite comfortable and they're listening to a lecture and it's quite interesting and they're involved in it, but they're not really thinking about anything else. They're not thinking about why they're there or how they got there or how they're going to get back. They're just in the moment.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a bit different than mine because I was totally aware of where I was, but yeah, I guess I was drugged up to keep me down or calm at least.
Yes.
Coming back to the souls in the auditorium, how did they receive the information you gave them that something might happen to them?
Well, it was all done with speech, but also with telepathy, which is interesting because they were receptive to that in the state that they were in. But there was a general feeling of completion, if I can use that word. They had an understanding that this was their life, this was what was going to happen. They understood at a soul level the reasons why, because our human mind that we have in this life thinks about things quite differently in many ways to how the soul understands it. Soul has a deeper understanding and a much broader picture than just confined to this life. So there was this feeling of completion. There was a feeling of loss and some regret that I was picking up as well. But nobody was screaming and saying, "No, I don't want that to happen." You know, it was like, okay, this is going to happen. This is how we're going to go about it. This is how I'm going to deal with it.
Okay, because I know when you're out of body.
Yeah, there was the feeling of loss for family and friends and a life that they were living, but it was not a terrible wrench. There was an underlying understanding.
So no panic then. So that's,
no.
Okay.
No.
Because I know when you're out of body, the real you is the essence, and well, when I perceive being out of body, my thoughts were my own, but I knew that my body was over there, but I didn't really care about it for some reason. So, because when you're in body, you're in the body, but when you're out of the body, you're the real you, but the vessel's over there. So can we get into some of the because the Greys told you what's going to happen. So what are we gonna?
Well, they didn't tell me everything that's going to happen. They gave me warning signs.
Okay.
And you asked me before earlier on about did I know when this was going to happen, and I've talked about this in speeches before. The ETs can reach into your mind and pick out a little saying or something that you understand, something that is clear to you. So they pulled out the analogy of a rubber band, and because everyone was asking in these lectures, well, when will this be? And they gave the analogy, well, it depends on your spiritual evolvement, because we have gone really backwards on this planet in terms of our understanding of spirituality and our exuding that spirituality to others. It's all about, looking after the self in this world in many ways. So they talked about some days you could pull the band out like this, and as a civilization, you've moved a long way. There may have been some things happening on the planet during that time that really showed a spiritual input that was really great. And then other days, there may be bombings and all sorts of terrible things happening, and it'll snap right back here. And on that day, your spirituality is here. And other days, it'll be here. So they seemed to know when things might happen in a rough time period. But one thing they did say, which I always bring to mind, is that they said that our spiritual evolvement and our understanding of consciousness as it grows can lessen the impact of these things on the planet. Now, I found that very interesting because, this was said 30-something years ago, and our understanding of consciousness and telepathy and all of that wasn't so hot back then. So now we can take it that our collective consciousness or our mass consciousness can affect the mother planet, can affect nature, can affect everything around us. And I think we know that. We know that what we are can affect other people. and can affect the whole planet and our attitudes towards the environment, etc. So this was a real key thing for me, that the more people who come on board, who start critical thinking, who start taking responsibility for their life, who starts real spiritually evolving, taking care of animals, nature, the planet, anything that they can offer to the environment, is going to make that much improvement that it will actually smooth a little bit the path that we have to go through. They said it will not stop certain things happening, because that's the nature of our planet, our moving tectonic plates and the influence, solar influence at this time, the solar cycle we're going through. But we can get through this in a better way, or we can get through it in a worse way. It's really up to us. But no real time predictions of when this will be.
So we should expect a smorgasbord of a lot of stuff happening. I guess, climate change,
Yes.
tectonic plates and stuff like that.
Yes, actually, I think that's a good point, because experiencers often are very focused on their experiences and other people's experiences. And at this point in time, we need to be broadening our understanding out further. Experiencers also have understandings to do with nature, to do with discerning things, to do with being able to cut through something and think critically about it and get to the core. And I think we really need to be looking closely at a whole range of other subjects that are interlinked. And I'm seeing this interlinking happening, like with the whole COVID situation is interlinking with what the ET said, because they said there would come a time on the planet which they referred to as a dead stage. Now, not meaning that everyone's going to die, meaning that we would just be damped right down. We would be still. We would be forced to be still. And we would not be looking up, they said, meaning that we would forget about many other things that are happening, and we would be focusing on our day-to-day mundane survival. And they didn't talk about us being in danger of tsunamis and earthquakes and everything else. They talked about this dead stage where we would just go flat and we would be confined. Now, is that sort of not what's happening now?
Very.
Yes, there's the tragic loss of life. Hundreds of thousands of people have lost their life in this COVID situation. But at the same time, as a civilization, we've gone flat. We've stopped flying around the world. We've stopped moving across continents.
Loving. We stopped loving.
Yes, we've stopped loving. We've stopped thinking for ourselves. We're getting fearful and we're confused and waiting for the next directive to be told what to do to make us feel better.
Yep.
So, I'm speculating here, but for the last few years, since my book came out, and I'm looking at all of these things that they said would happen that are happening, and I'm now wondering, is this dead stage now? Is this the whole COVID situation? And they said it would lead to eventually massive confusion, massive fear, and massive chaos. And they showed us images of protests, thousands of people protesting. Well, we've been seeing that already.
Yep.
Thousands of people protesting, buildings on fire, people getting so angry and upset they're smashing Molotov cocktails. Well, we've seen some of that happening in Portland in the States, for example,
yep.
And other countries where there's been mass demonstrations. So is this the period they talked about? They were not specific and didn't give names and times, because if they do that, we try to change it immediately. These things are destined to happen. They're part of our movement, our change, our growth, our evolution. They have to happen. It's how we deal with them and how we critically think through them that is the important thing. And many, many people are not doing that. They're not critically thinking through this.
Well,
so yes, they talked about this massive confusion and chaos, and that eventually something would be revealed, and they called this the Great Deception. So now I'm thinking on this. I spend much of every day thinking, what is the great deception? And I'm watching the news and I'm watching what's happening in the world, what's coming out, what's being revealed. And they talked about a great deception will be revealed. It will be uncovered. And the anger and the rage that this deception revelation causes will create extreme chaos, but it will also start to create extreme change. And that's what we're looking for.
Oh, that's scary.
So when you think about what this could be, they said it would be something that would affect the whole world. If we look at the situations in the world at the moment, the only thing that's affecting the whole world is the COVID situation. So we haven't gone forward in time yet, so I don't know what's going to happen next week or next month. I'm dealing with what I'm looking at the moment, which is the COVID situation. And many people are questioning the vaccines. True. Because of the lack of time that has been given or allowed for them to be properly tested and investigated. We're told that they have been properly done so, but then medical people are quietly saying, well, actually, no, they haven't had long enough. So if it was to be revealed that the vaccine is damaging in some way or not adequate and causes some problems further down the track for people or is harmful, would that not cause global chaos, anger, rage, and a great deception to be uncovered? I don't know. I don't want to frighten people or speculate, but I'm simply saying this is what was told, and this is the situation in front of us now. And it is of grave concern, should be of grave concern to everyone.
Looking at people that we were talking about soul journeys prior, and when it comes to those who don't question the narrative right now, what I see with them, at least health-wise, because I've had my own health problems, and for the last like 10-15 years I've studied a lot and I've applied a lot to my own body. So that puts me in a perspective, like a different way of thinking and seeing the world differently, and how, because of the lies that I realized that were, I guess, put upon us health-wise. And because they're always talking about science, but anybody can put their name on a label or on a report. And what these individuals who were giving me backlash for my beliefs regarding the vaccines and stuff, they never had health challenges, they never questioned, and they never studied. So they accept the narrative, and it's a lot easier for them to accept it than to actually question and might go through ridicule. So that's what's happening right now. But I'm really glad seeing that there's a lot of I won't say parades, but demonstrations, and a lot of people going out in the streets and protesting. But I'm hoping it's enough. But again, it's really too soon to say what's going to happen later on.
Well, I think we didn't come here on this earth to go through life unquestioningly. We came here to grow and progress. And if we look back in history, some of the greatest game changers, people who've really changed things, have been the critical thinkers, have been the ones who stood alone, the ones who questioned, the ones who just didn't follow the crowd. So we owe it to ourselves as a civilization to always investigate, question, research, inform ourselves, and make improvements if those improvements are needed. And, we see a number of countries have withdrawn or put temporary holds on the vaccines, and I think that's a good thing. And I think that needs to continue. We need to be, this is our life and our being and our civilization. And it behoves us to question always and get what is best for humanity.
Did the Grace tell you that we should leave the cities, or to, I don't know, gain up, or try to get more food, try to buy more canned food and try to prepare for something?
Well, they always recommended preparation. And I remember going to a city in Australia some years ago to speak, And there's an experiencer there that whose experiences and perspectives on everything I really align with. She's much younger than me, but we really align on those things. And we sat down, we had dinner together, and we sat down and we both said almost at the same time, we're in a time of preparation now. And we both went, oh, because we both basically, it was the first thing we came up with, was something we both said. And we just, collapsed in laughter because of the synchronicity of it. Now that was, maybe 18 years ago. So it's been a long time of preparation. But if we look back and we look at the changes that have taken place, even in the UFO field, in the sightings arena, in the contact arena, there's been a lot of big changes happening there. And what we are doing as experiencers, abductees, is we are cementing our foundation. We've taken this time of preparation. We're now more open. People are more willing to listen. We're creating that foundation, and it's going to be needed, because one of the other things that the ETs talked about in terms of people like ourselves is that one day there would be what they call, when we come out of all of this chaos, and they said something big will happen that will snap us out of this chaos, make us think twice, make us again start examining that there could be something else out there. Now, I don't know what that's going to be. Is it going to be a sighting that thousands of people see? Is it going to be a revelation from a government? I don't know. But they said when this time happens, it will instigate the time of examination. And this time of examination they talked about was not just the whole ET UFO subject. It was many, many other things. It's the way we educate ourselves. It's our health system. It's everything. And they said that at this time, we were to be aware. If we were to continue this work, this is a group of people I was talking to at the time that I was part of. If we are to continue our work, we must be aware that there will be a time when people will be quite antagonistic towards us. Because as people start to examine the subject, and if the reality of it is being presented to them in some way by some event or disclosure, then they have to question their entire life, their belief systems, their worldview. Everything for some people will come crashing down around their ears. And humans are quite predictable. The first thing they want to do is blame someone. So then the people who've been talking to ETs, for example, may well be the people that they turn on or turn to for information. So we were actually made aware of that. And at the same time, up on the screen, they put images, futuristic images of us. How do they do that? I don't know how they do that, but I recognize myself public speaking and others in the room with me. So you see, this is all destiny. It seems to have been laid down somewhere in the universe already, and we are rolling along that track. And with our growth of understanding, spirituality, and our evolution of consciousness, we can change certain things, but the track's still there that we're going along. But we can adapt to the track as we go, and we can make improvements, and we can make things easier.
Well, I'm glad to hear that there's hope, because nowadays it's getting worse in Canada. The confinement, and they're trying to push. I think they're decrees, they're not actually laws. So but again, if people follow them, then we're screwed. So yeah. Well, at least people are out there and they're protesting, which gives me hope.
Yes, I think as long as they are protesting and not harming others, and voicing their opinion in the best way possible, that's okay. It's when it comes to violence and uncontrolled anger that it's a danger to everyone. Now
we've talked about the the messages, and we've talked about a bit of disclosure. I know you wanted to talk about the third wave.
Yes, I'm looking around me, and I'm seeing a lot of what I consider to be third wavers coming to the fore. And if we look at some of the countries in the world who, for example, have got very young leaders, prime ministers or presidents or whatever, that number has increased. We're seeing more and more younger people in their 30s and 40s getting into politics in a very different way. So they're not looking at things the old way that has been standard in any one country. They are thinking outside the box. They're thinking of possible solutions and how we can move things forward and make people's quality of life better, for example. So instead of the whole money emphasis and business emphasis, we're looking at people who want to improve the quality of life. And I think that that's a very big change in terms of politics. It's not so much about I want to win and I want my way to be the way. It's about how can we all move forward in a better way. So the third wave, I think, are going to start coming out very quickly now. And if I look at some of the third wavers that I know in New Zealand, here in this little country, I can see that that's happening. They're in positions now in medicine and business as well, and in food production. There's areas right across the board, education, etc., where younger people are in positions of authority. And in the past, often it's been a pecking order of you move up the ranks and then you retire. Now it's you move up the ranks really quickly because you've got new ideas and people want them. So that I'm seeing a lot more of that happening, which is a great thing. And I'm also noting that a lot of the third wavers are choosing not to have children or choosing just to have one child. That's very interesting because the ETs also talked about that, how these young people moving into the future in these positions of creating change will choose that's how they want it. Either they have no children so that they devote their life as an experiencer to work, to that kind of work, or they just have one child knowing that the planet is already overpopulated.
Okay. Now, I'm not sure if this is true, but I've heard that one of the reasons why the third wavers might not have children was to create karma. And the fact, their attachment to Earth, they want to leave. They've got a mission to do on Earth that when it's done, they pass over, they leave. But some of them might, the fact that they have children might still have a connection to Earth and might come back. So I'm not sure if you ever heard about that.
I have heard some talk of that, but it's not something that I personally subscribe to. I just think that once you go from here, if you have an earthly attachment to your family for a while, that's quite normal from a mediumship point of view. That's quite normal for people to do that, and then eventually they may move on. But I don't know that can create karma in any way. I just think that when your job is finished here, if you've come here with a particular mission, you're going to leave it. You're going to leave because you've probably got one lined up somewhere else.
The funny thing, back, oh my God, around 2008, I was with another girlfriend at the time, and she wanted a child. But there was a voice inside of me always saying, and this is true, the voice was saying, don't do it, don't do it. If you do become a father, you won't be able to do what you're destined to do. And this was very prevalent. And she was very adamant. She really wanted a child, and she even stopped, the taking birth pills. And so I know what you're getting at.
Yes, and if I look at that's very interesting, Janet, because if I look at my own life too, a lot of things have been taken away from it. Like you and like many experiencers, I've had some chronic health problems, and you find that for a start tends to bring your world down a little bit. There's some things you can't do anymore. And looking back now, I see crossroads, and I've talked to my husband about this, where it was almost like I had a choice of I could have gone this way or I could have gone that way. And I always took the path that seemed to be the most difficult. And looking back, if I'd taken that path, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today. I would have gone off into some other kind of life. And, you know, it's really interesting. Hindsight is a great thing, but you can see how you've moved along through your life and the synchronicities and the things that happened at crucial points that had that influence on you. No matter how difficult it was at the time, when you look back now, you can see the sense of it.
Yes, well, I tend to say to people that were pieces of a chess on a chessboard, and we were being moved around. And why I say that is when before I started getting really bad health problems, I went to a medium, and that medium prophesized I'd be meeting a girl that we'd be dating like a year and a half after, and so I wasn't expecting much, but like a year and a half after, I meet up with which eventually turned out to be my fiance, and she was a British abductee, and and she showed me everything I know, and she brought me into this world. At first, I thought she was in a sect, so that's how little I knew about the UFO world, and I didn't even know that what I saw was possibly gray or what. And after that, we've had like multiple stuff happen together, like the shadow people, and again and meeting you. If it weren't for her or certain individuals, I would be on this path. And the fact that I had my own health stuff, then I started questioning the world and whatnot. So yeah, we do. It's as if there's a hand, an invisible hand moving us to meet certain people, and it affects us, it changes us, and I guess we're in a position to help others at the same time.
That's very true, Yannick. And in my book, I write about when I was an 8-year-old, and they brought a string of soul lights into the room on the craft. And they said, these are people you are going to meet in your life who will have a critical influence and assist you in some way with this path that you're going down. And they brought them into the room, and then they said, we're going to leave you to get to know them. They left the room, and they all came in one at a time close to my face. And in my consciousness, not within the ball of light itself, but in my consciousness, I could register things about that person, what they looked like, a little snippet about their life or circumstances. But then that quickly faded into the subconscious, and as a child, I didn't recall it. But I have met certain people in my life since, like Dr. Rudy Schild, like my husband, and like yourself and others, who I know were amongst those balloons. Because I recall us meeting in Toronto at the Alien Expo. I was having breakfast and you turned up. We were already Facebook friends, but you walked past, and then you turned around and asked me if I was Suzy Hansen, I think, and then you came and had breakfast, and we sat together and talked. And since then, I've had a real connection with you. Just often think of you from afar. So I know that there's this interplay that goes on, that we have this group of souls who are part of our being here, and we're part of theirs. And it's all part of this agenda that the ETs talked about, and amongst experiencers in particular. And when I spoke in the States in 1999, an experiencer came into the experiencer session in the morning, and she was looking for a seat. The little room was quite full, and I could see from where I was sitting that there was a seat down the end. And I was thinking to myself, oh, there's a seat down the end, she can't see it. And she looked up directly at me with a look of shock on her face. And then she turned and walked down and sat in that seat. And afterwards, when we left the room, I left ahead of her because I was closer to the door, and I could hear someone running down the corridor after me, and she grabbed me by the shoulder and said, I heard you. So for the rest of the time we were there, we periodically had this very, very clear telepathy. And it's the clearest I've ever had with another human being. So there was this real connection. We seemed to know each other, even though we didn't know each other. So there's these special things that happen where maybe we've been together on a craft, or maybe we're in a particular soul group doing a certain thing, and that's why we're meant to meet at some stage to assist each other further on along the path.
Have you ever met certain humans on board a craft and met them on Earth?
Yes, two people, I won't name them, of course, but two people who can describe the exact same room and circumstances as I can. And I got out of it. I arrived in a taxi when I was speaking in Norway. I arrived in a taxi and I saw this guy walking along the pavement out in the country at this beautiful hotel in the country. He's walking along the pavement, pulling his little suitcase. And I said to the Turkish speaker who was there, "Oh, look, there's," and then I stopped because I didn't know their name. And I felt really stupid. Mm. And he saw this person pointing in the window of the taxi, and he leaned down and looked, and he went, "Ah," and waved at me, and then he looked equally confused. And I got out of the car, leapt out of the car, and he came up to me, and we looked at each other, and he said, "I don't know you, but I know you." Wow. And we threw our arms around each other and were both crying. How do you explain something like that? He's an experiencer. We don't have a conscious memory of seeing each other on a craft, but we absolutely knew each other and had this really deep love for each other and connection. Is it a soul thing? Is it an experiencer thing? I don't know. But we are in constant contact and have been ever since, and share a lot of perspectives and talk things over together.
Oh, that's so nice. That's so beautiful. I know two of my, I know about three friends, like the Hewins twins in the States. Well, they were on the craft and they met Matt Moniz on board, and and eventually they found each other on Earth. So that's it's not a rare thing to actually meet people on board and then see them later on.
Yep, I know two experiences in Australia who have clear recollection of seeing each other on craft. Oh. And there's a lady here in Tauranga, the city I live in, who rang me up one day and said, "You've got," she said, "I'm just heading off to the airport because I'm flying out overseas, but I had memory of being on a craft last night, and you've got a bruise on you somewhere where you wouldn't think to look. And you were there, we were lining up, we were getting some sort of inoculation to protect us. But I can't tell you more, I'm off now," and she hung up. No. And I sort of didn't take too much notice because I hadn't seen a bruise anywhere. But then when I was getting dressed to go out later on, I put my arm up to comb my hair, and right up on the back of the arm where I wouldn't possibly be able to see it was exactly what she had described, of concentric circles with a dot in the middle and slight finger marks around it. So these things happen.
Yeah. We've talked briefly about the third wave. Can you get it to sort of more general description of the other two waves of
Okay, so the first wave is broken into two pieces, and each of the waves are broken into two groups, main groups. And in the first wave, the first part of that, they came into the planet in the early, like 1903, 1909, 1920, etc., in that era there. And they were often the people who did the seances and the early experimentation with telepathy and experimentation with different forms of meditation in Western society, and were giving readings and all of that kind of thing, which has gone on for a long time on this planet, of course. But they were forming groups and they were forming study groups, etc., which was a little bit different in taking it into the community more. So they were showing us what we can do, what we're capable of. And the second part of the first wave is what some people might call the star kids. I don't personally like that term, but it exists along with indigo kids, crystal kids, etc. So they started coming into the planet and are still coming in around the 1980s, 1990s, because they are also showing us what we can do, in the sense that many of these have kinetic skills, they have psychic skills, they have past life memories, they have memories of being living a life on a planet somewhere else or whatever. So they have these extraordinary memories, but they are not as big a group as what a lot of researchers in the contact field try to put out there. They are not this massive group. They are a selected group that are coming in to open us up, open our consciousness up to what mankind is capable of doing. So they do not have any part in this long-term agenda that I talk about, the 3 waves. They don't have a part in terms of implementing a lot of stuff. They just are. They get into music and art and meditation and all sorts of extraordinary things, and they live it. They show their abilities overtly, and we can learn from that. The second wave is broken into 2 parts again. So you've got the early contactees and abductees who were generally not treated well by the press and the media, but who spoke openly about contact with the Greys in particular. So we have the second group, known as the abduction group, more transformed later into experiencers as well, as the experiencers came forward and said, well, my experience wasn't negative, it was positive. So we've got this big lumpy group in the middle that are the early ones, and then the later ones who talked about their experiences. So this is a finite group. It's the biggest group at the moment. But as we die off, the third wave and the first wave was the star kids will keep on coming in. So the second wave is massive. It's a finite group, and certain ones have been taken out of that by the ETs who showed particular abilities, and they're the ones who are the parents of the third wave. So the second wave is the one that I'm in. It's the one where the communicators, we're the ones who've gone public with our experiences. Many have not yet gone public. Many are still to be woken up. Many are still asleep at the moment. They're leading their life. They know they've had some experiences. They don't understand it. They don't want to go there at the moment for whatever reason, but they will do eventually. And then the third wave, the children of some of the second wavers, they're the ones who are getting into positions of responsibility and power in a positive sense. And they're the ones who will lead us into sweeping changes in many of our institutions of medicine and law, etc., right across the board. And they will take us largely through some of the difficult times. You see, I don't know whether the very difficult times that leads to this massive transformation will happen in my lifetime, or whether it will happen in the rest of their lifetime. I don't know, and we can't work that out at the moment. We seem to be moving quickly towards a point, a knife edge. So I'm thinking that a lot of this is going to happen in my lifetime, but the transformational changes that takes us into a new way of living and a new way of creating life on our planet will be the third wavers, and then their children after that.
Yeah, that was I was hoping at least disclosure would happen in my lifetime. Why put in the effort and not see the fruit of your work, your labor?
But Yannick, that depends on your perception of what disclosure is.
Yeah.
Because this talk here is disclosure. Every time an experiencer stands up or a witness to a UFO sighting talks about it, it's disclosure. But we've got into this habit of waiting for the United States to tell us what's going on. Can we believe anything that comes out? I'm looking at some of the soft disclosure and the things that are coming out at the moment, and I'm seeing possible agenda there, possible agenda there, possible agenda there. I think we have to, experiencers and abductees, contactees, we have to concentrate on our work. We have to concentrate on what we are trying to promote in the best possible way. Not airy-fairy, not scary either, but the best possible way of presenting what we know and understand. And we do not have a global group doing that. We have no cohesion. And that's the problem. Whereas these governments and militaries, they have cohesion. They may be compartmentalized, but they have a body that sticks together. And that's what we as experiencers lack, is a global body.
I guess the word disclosure is a bit bad. I think mass awareness would be more proper. And
I think so.
And at least talking to experiencers around the world, it's a lot taboo still. I won't say certain countries, certain Asian countries at least. I know that I've got friends over there, and some experiencers over there, they use it as I guess a way of funding themselves, to bring in money, and they don't want others to do it, so they try to monopolize certain aspects of contact, and I think that's really bad. And
but Yannick, we've been seeing that for years in the gravy train of many of the speaking venues in the world. We see researchers, and I'm not naming any, but I'm sure we can all understand that there are people who will utilize any subject that has public interest, high public interest, which it does, will utilize that and to make money or to make a name for themselves or whatever. We do see that happening. And sometimes some of the information that's shared is minimal or can be confusing. So I think this is where our critical thinking comes in. We examine everything carefully.
Well, do you have anything else you want to get into? Because we've talked about the three subjects you wanted to talk about.
Not really. I just think that we have every reason to be hopeful. But if I was in a country, as I am in New Zealand, with seismic and volcanic activity, I'd be getting my civil defence box ready with food supplies and all the, first aid, etc., etc. And I think that we really do have to attend to the basics. Often we can get quite airy-fairy about the subject. Many people talk about ascension and they're going to go to the new earth and everything. But hang on a minute, before that happens, something awful must be going to happen. There's some tough times to go through. Let's focus on that one step at a time. And I also think that this is a time now also for experiencers who know it's their path to speak out, which is why I do it. But and you're doing it as an interviewer. But I also think that there are, they've predicted a time when people like ourselves will be looked at closely and scrutinized. And I think that people do need to think carefully before they rush out and go public about their experiences. If you want to talk to your family and your close friends, yes, that's great. Get it off your chest, bring it out, and have that ripple effect in your own community. But I do think that this is a time when we have to be very careful and look after ourselves as well. Because I know I've had 2 life-threatening experiences because of my speaking and my beliefs, and I think people need to be aware of that. This isn't a game. This is deadly serious. This is something that the military and the governments and all of the 3-letter groups are looking at. This is serious stuff. We have to take it seriously, and we have to speak with integrity about it, because this is something that's going to affect the whole world and change the world.
I guess we're a force for change, change that certain factions might not want. As soon as we start making people think, that's when we do become a problem. I know my phone was tapped for an entire year when I was dating the abductee from Britain, and I know a lot of people that come to me, they came to me privately and talked about their stories, and they're really, really amazing. But I tried to get them on, but they're afraid. They're afraid for their children. The health, the youth services might come and take them away. Yeah. And some of them have family within the government with high positions. So again, they're afraid that something might happen to them because of that. So we do have to be careful with whom we share and how we bring the story out.
And I guess the same applies too for people in the military and the aviation who might come forward. There's risks attached to that as well, because we're dealing with a subject that is probably the greatest thing in mankind's history, has the greatest potential to change everything on this planet. And there are a lot of people and corporations that don't want that change because they will no longer have the monopoly.
Well, we've been at this for almost an hour and a half, so let's call it a night or a morning.
Yep.
And well, thank you so much for coming on, Susan. You're lovely, and it's been a blast to have you on again. Thank you for your friendship.
Thank you, Yannick, and for yours.
And to those who had the pleasure of watching today's show, hope you guys enjoyed it. More interviews coming up, and I'll see you guys next time. So take care, everyone. Hello, everyone. This is Mr. Gray, and thanks for watching today's episode. If you are an abductee, contactee, or experiencer, and you believe that your story could help others, please feel free to contact me through my YouTube channel email. When it comes to experiencers, the ET phenomena, and the future, remember, truth will out.